Now, Richard Corbett, Labour's position on the customs union is that it will leave the customs union but negotiate a treaty that will do the work of the customs union, so relatively keeping things status quo. When you look at what's happening with the Conservative Party at the moment, the government, in terms of the customs union, where do you think they're going to go? What do you think the Brexit in terms of customs union is going to end up looking like?
Well, at the moment, they're trying to find a compromise between the two wings of the Conservative Party, essentially, around have your cake and eat it position. Leave the customs union, but not have any of the downsides of leaving the customs union. And they're finding that's actually rather difficult to do. That's why Labour's position of saying leaving the customs union actually is rather job-destroying, bad for our economy. It's not a sensible thing to do. We should make sure we remain in a customs union.
Well, I mean, one thing that you've certainly been saying, particularly vocally on Twitter, for example, is the whole idea of, Remain now. Nice to meet these other Remain campaigners, people who voted Leave in the Brexit referendum, but who would vote now to vote Remain. Mm-hmm. What's your view on the second referendum? It's still very much open in terms of Labour policy. It seems to be very much, it's not been ruled out. What would you like to see as the leader of the Labour Party in the European Parliament?
Well, I must say I'm not surprised that there is a growing clamour, as you point out, even from people who voted Leave, to say we want to be able to reconsider, because Brexit's turning out to be somewhat different, shall we say, from what was promised by the Leave campaign. Far from bringing in lots of money that would all go to the NHS, remember, it's costing an arm and a leg. Far from helping our economy, it's damaging it. Far from having easy new trade deals with the rest of the world, that's now looking rather dodgy and rather unlikely, or at least not on terms that would be beneficial to Britain. So it's not surprising that people are saying it's all very well to vote for Brexit as a general principle, but we want to say on the actual Brexit deal, once we can see what it really entails, that's not an unreasonable request.
And is that something which which you would want to see the Labour Party adopting? The people referendum in terms of the actual deal itself.
Well, at this stage, the Labour Party as such has not called for a second referendum because we're still in the phase of finding out where the government, the divided government, will end up going.
Is it something you would
but
its
Labour Party hasn't ruled it out either. And I think as we move into a situation, if we are faced with a Brexit deal that the government brings back, which is manifestly damaging for Britain, which is likely to be or is rejected by the House of Commons, and you have a ratification crisis, we've said the House of Commons should then determine where we go next. And of course, one of the options is they go away and negotiate something different or better. Another option is to reconsider Brexit.
In terms of your personal position, though, you're someone who is the leader of, the Labour Party in the European Parliament. A significant voice, has the knowledge of both Europe and what's going on domestically in the Labour Party. In terms of what you want to see, you've said it's sensible to recognise that people have the right to reconsider Brexit. Are you pushing internally within the party? Are you pushing for the idea that Labour needs to give the people a vote on the terms of Brexit and give them that second referendum?
Well, there are plenty of people in the Labour Party and MEPs among them who anyone, in fact, who's looked into detail at this quite often comes to the conclusion we're heading in a direction that was never explained to people at the time of the referendum. In fact, contradicts what was promised to people at the time of the referendum. Once you actually see the deal that emerges, it's a democratic principle. You must have the right to reconsider.
And so that is, you're for a second.
I'm very sympathetic to that view.
Yeah, I mean the only idea behind that is obviously Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary Aaron Smith was sacked by Corbyn for breaking Labour policy to call for a referendum on the final Brexit deal. That kind of sacking because
he's a front bencher. The front bench has not reached a collective decision on that. That's why there was a little bit of tension around that. Speaking as a member of the European Parliament, speaking
leader of the Labour
speaking,
Party,
knowing the opinion of many of I think all my fellow MEPs, all I can say is that there's a lot of sympathy for the view that if the deal that comes back is a bad, divisive, costly, bad for Britain deal, it's not unreasonable to say that there should be a chance to reconsider it.
Is Jeremy Corbyn, is the leadership listening to, Labour MEPs when, as you've said, most of them seem to be very sympathetic to the view of a second referendum? Have you been given any assurances that it's something which is being seriously considered?
We're a democratic party. There's a lot of lively debates in the Labour Party around the shadow cabinet table, which I attend, in the National Policy Forum and the National Executive Committee of the party, in Parliament, in the Parliamentary Labour Party and in the EPLP. These issues are constantly debated because they're vital for the future of our country.
But what's been the conclusions? What's been the response from the leadership? Will obviously be the one setting the policy, setting the direction of the party.
At the moment, we're looking at what the government is doing and trying to puzzle out what they're up to. But it looks increasingly, who can tell, because they're at such loggerheads internally. There's more negotiations going on between the two wings of the Conservative Party than between Britain and Europe at the moment. So we're not entirely sure where they are taking us. But we have said, as a party, that if they come back with a deal that's bad for Britain, we will oppose that deal.
And in terms of, what the Labour Party will end up agreeing to, let's say Labour Party do not go for a second referendum, and then do not push for a second referendum, people's vote, something which Labour MEPs, it seems yourself included, are very sympathetic to. Would that be something you'd find very difficult to, stay loyal to the party leadership with?
Well, you're putting in quite a number of assumptions there. You're assuming that this government's going to come back with a wonderful deal that we all like, for a start. I'm not sure that that's quite likely to happen. We'll see later today how they come out of their latest round of internal fighting in the Conservative government, but we're some way from actually having a deal to vote on.
And in terms of the customs union, where do you see this going? You're someone who knows this institution. You've been attending the debates, you've been listening to European colleagues, and obviously been following what the government's been doing in the UK. What do you think is the most likely outcome of this whole noise happening at the moment with the customs union? What is going to be the realistic endpoint?
The government is grappling with three dilemmas. If you want to leave a customs union, how do you do that without creating barriers, in this case to our main export market, where we have supply chains going back and forth that are vital to our manufacturing sector? Second, if you leave the customs union, what happens to the deals that customs union, the EU, has with countries across the planet, trade deals which are reasonably advantageous because they were negotiated with the full clout of Europe, the world's largest market, on our side, rather than us coming along as just as Britain and saying, could we have the same or something better, please? Not easy. And the third dilemma is, how on earth, by leaving the customs union, do you make the Northern Ireland border a customs border and not have customs controls? How do you do it? The rest of Europe is waiting with bated breath to find out how on earth you could do that, and the government has not yet found any credible way of doing it.
And do you think that, what's your solution? Do you have a solution in terms
to remain in the customs union?
And do you think is going to be the end point? Do you think that's going to be the inevitable end point?
Well, it's the view that the House of Lords has expressed, which will now return to the Commons. There's a lot of people say there's a majority in the Commons for that. We will see when they vote on it, though there's a rumour now that the government's going to postpone for months the vote on that because it knows it will lose it. But if indeed the majority in the Commons supports remaining in the customs union, which may well be the case, the government will surely have to act on that instruction.
Richard Corbett, thank you very much.
Thank you.